Blood DK is a really strange spec in that if I play really well, I shouldn't actually need any healing from a healer in probably about 95% of dungeon scenarios. The times I do need healing are usually times that I make mistakes, so things that I should be working on to get better and not relying on another healer. This has caused some weird conversations from the healer role as well, where they think that they need to track certain things to try to understand when a Death Knight is actually in danger. It's probably not uncommon to see a Death Knight at low health and start to panic. Obviously, if that was a warrior tank or something like a brewmaster, that would be more likely to be a time when that person is going to die. But as a blood DK, there's really no reason to think that that's a problem. We have multiple things based on our HP that can save us there, and of course, Death Strike. So a lot of healers might be coming to this topic wondering what is important to track from a blood DK. And unfortunately, I just don't think there's any one thing that you should rely on. A lot of people are going to say things like, well, see if he has a lot of runic power, because if he has a lot of runic power, it means he can get multiple Death Strikes in. But absolutely, I have found myself in a situation where I have a lot of runic power and I think I'm safe, and then I get hit extremely hard, and before I can get that Death Strike off, I die, or some other grievous error happens, and it sets us in a path where I just can't recover from, even with that runic power. So maybe looking at cooldowns would be more appropriate. Do I have things like Vampiric Blood and Dancing Rune Weapon up? Then I should be safe. But there's absolutely times where I go into packs and have those things up, and I think I'm safe, and maybe I use them a little too early or at the wrong times, and it's just those patterns that if you fall into them at the wrong time, wrong place, wrong time for some of them, you could easily find yourself dead, regardless of what actually the character looks like it's outputting. You could have 145 runic power and every CD available, but if you don't use them at the exact right times and you don't get a little lucky at times, you can still easily die, especially on hard fortified weeks. So instead, it's better to just assume that the player will make the mistakes or the savior of himself and just try to focus on what else the healer can bring in this situation. It's very unlikely that the healer will have to do substantial consecutive healing spells on a Blood Death Knight, so being able to provide something outside of that is what truly makes that pick valuable. So honestly, one of the most common questions I've received in years of streaming is, what is my favorite pick alongside the Blood Death Knight for a healer? And it makes sense because a lot of times you see the way I'm playing and tanking these dungeons, it's almost like the healer's kind of being dragged along. They're not always the most useful role at that time. So really picking the right class as well is going to help them be more useful. For example, some healers, especially in Season 2, are doing a vast difference in terms of output outside of healing, meaning like something like Holy Pally or Resto Shaman's offense is going to be substantially better than something like Resto Druid or even Mistweaver or something like that. But in Season 3, things are changing a lot. They're nerfing Holy Pally substantially, and they're buffing a lot of the offense and output spells for some of the lesser played healers right now. So with all of those changes in mind, as well as with what's going to be changing for Blood DK, what are my top 1 through 6 healers for Mythic Plus? Well, this has been pretty consistently an easy choice for me for tier 1 number 1 overall, and that is going to be Resto Shaman. Now for years you might have heard me say something about Holy Paladin. That was partially because I played Holy Paladin a lot myself, so I knew exactly what it could bring. But now that I'm finding such comfort in playing Night Fae as Blood DK, it feels like I need that a lot less. I have a lot more consistent defense pack to pack, so I just allow my CDs to carry the rest of the load. And the problem recently with Holy Paladin is that they've been a real mana hog. It's not been the biggest deal in Season 2, and I think in Season 3 it's not really going to be that big of a deal either, but now they're losing a substantial amount of offense. It's pretty clear that Resto Shaman is tier 1 number 1 overall for Blood DK pairing. Let's go through a little bit about why that's the case for Resto Shaman. The number one thing a Blood DK might need at times is a big savior type CD, something that when it's put on him, it's going to substantially increase the chance that he can survive, meaning a time when you don't have a lot of CD usage, you don't have a lot of runic power, you're in a state of being behind, whether that's runes, positioning, threat, whatever it is, they're giving you that cushion that I cannot die in. Resto Shaman actually have multiple of these, but the best one in the game is Spirit Link Totem. It's a CD that can absolutely turn the tide of any situation when you're tanking. Almost impossible to die within Spirit Link as long as there's other players in there. And don't forget, it is also a damage reduction as well. It's on a 3-minute CD, but in Season 3, it's going to be a much lower CD thanks to the seasonal fix, and I really hope to see Shamans using it a lot more. Resto Shaman has always been great with Blood DK, but it seems like it's kind of turned into this weird flavor of the month pick, and people are focusing on things that aren't necessarily what I would say is the kit maximizing itself. And even though they're finding success with other tanks, it's really hindering my ability to play Blood DK with them because I'm assuming that they're going to supplement me when I need it. On top of that, Another one of these types of situations is Rock Elemental. Rock Elemental can easily save a death, and if used at the right time can really absorb a lot of damage to the tank. It's hard to get used well, and it dies pretty quick at times, but now with the changes to the legendary situation for Shaman, it's going to be back to being a prominent thing they use a lot. So this is just natural synergy. You don't even have to worry about that. You know they're going to be using Rock Ellie. As long as they use it at times when it helps you, then that's just free value. No other healer has anything like that. On top of that, they also have an incredibly wide utility kit. Of course, they have Bloodlust, which is probably one of the most important utilities you can get. A lot of people might get tricked into thinking using drums is fine, but frankly, it's so much less haste that it really makes a big difference, especially on tyrannical weeks. They also have a ranged interrupt, which is insanely valuable because a lot of the times you're in danger, it's when you're fighting many casters. They also have a ranged AoE stun, which is one of only 2 healers having any type of AoE stun. And honestly, an AoE stun used to be absolutely crucial in surviving. It's not as important as it used to be, but it can still act as a really good interrupt for things that aren't even related to you surviving as a tank, and that can be valuable on its own. Really, when you have a healer with a ranged interrupt and something as powerful as Spirit Link, is there anything else to mention? Well, yes, actually there is. Their mastery synergizes perfectly with the ups and downs of Blood Death Knight. Being able to provide even more healing when you're at your weakest is insanely valuable, and a lot of times it's going to go really well with Vampiric Blood. And Riptide is a really nice heal now too. I think a lot of people don't understand how good a good hot can be at the right time for a Blood DK. But really their entire healing kit just plays very well with what Blood DK would need when they need it. But the ultimate reason that they're tier 1 number 1 is because of what they can put out besides that. When the healer doesn't actually have to heal the tank, they need to be able to do something else valuable. Obviously, if the group also doesn't need healing, then the clear choice is offense. And Resto Shaman does look like it's going to be the king of offense in Season 3. Holy Pally was a fierce contender in Season 2, but they're getting pretty substantial nerfs. And I do think Holy Pally's damage was relatively not very useful for Blood DK. Now let me explain what I mean by that. Blood DK really needs the extra help in big trash packs. So being able to do really good AoE damage is really important from the healer. Holy Pally's AoE damage was good, but where it really shined was its single target or priority funnel damage. Now that can be good for timing keys, but helping the Blood DK survive, that doesn't really help. It would be much better to just do a wide spread of AoE damage and just make everything die faster in those big AoE packs than try to kill bosses faster. Blood DK is actually really good against bosses, both in 5-mans and raids, and CD usage becomes much more lax when you aren't constantly wondering if you're about to get hit really hard by a large group of enemies. So Resto Shaman just kind of brings everything you would want. They have the best utility kit, the best damage kit, and they have a healing style that plays really well with Blood DK. Honestly, on a tier all by itself, there's no real competition, and even though in Season 2 I would say there is, I do think the nerfs to Holy Pally that are coming for Season 3 is going to really bring them backwards. That being said, they are still clearly tier 2, number 1, number 2 overall. Holy Paladin's kit is still going to always work well with Blood DK. Having a 3% damage reduction passively is insanely valuable from the healer slot. They could honestly bring that alone, and that would be probably all I need at times. But the reason Holy Pally's kit is so strong with Blood DK is because they have incredible burst healing. Especially when we're talking about things like Lay on Hands and Holy Shock, this is all you ever really need. Every once in a while, a big global of healing, and go about your business otherwise. I don't need you to be constantly casting spells on me, wondering if I'm going to spike. Just a quick instant heal every once in a while is enough. And of course, Blessing of Sacrifice is insanely valuable. No denying their offensive power is still going to be there even with the nerfs. Something to keep in mind is they've been nerfing Holy Pally every season as far back as I could remember from Legion, and they still are always going to be formidable offensively. Something like Consecrate just too much damage considering it's just a global that you can set and forget. But they do bring a decent utility kit. Things like Blessing of Freedom and Blessing of Protection do have some pretty decent usages at times, and they have a very good slew of CDs to help make sure you, especially as the tank, do not fall behind. Aura Mastery on Devotion Aura is incredibly valuable, and of course Wings turns all of the power it already has up to 11. So those are really the two obvious picks. After that it starts to get a lot murkier, and in the past this was a lot clearer. But now in Season 3, it's hard to predict. As of right now, though, I am going to say Tier 3 number 1, number 3 overall is actually going to still be Holy Priest. Things start to synergize a lot worse the further we get down here. But Holy Priest does have a really nice CD in the Guardian Angel thing there where you can keep the tank alive through a cheat death and increase the amount of healing done. It synergizes really well with Vampiric Blood and what Blood DK is already doing, like healing itself a lot. Outside of that, they do also have strong burst heals and a kit that can provide the tank with a lot of healing when they need it, but they are trapped into a little bit more casting and setting up stuff to make sure that they're able to keep the tank alive. They're definitely not the most reactionary healer, and they definitely don't have the best defensive kit, and they certainly don't have the best offensive kit, but they're better than you might think. There's a lot of builds out there now, which I'm not sure of the prevalence, that can do a lot of damage as a priest, and again, that's really valuable when you as the tank need almost no help. Every once in a while, some of their utility can be valuable too, but perhaps one of the most important things is that they also bring a really nice group buff in power with fortitude. Fortitude is really nice for blood DK because of how many things rely on our health pool, and of course it's good for the entire group too. But Holy Priest's healing kit is actually what really separates it from the next three. Now in Season 2, I've been having a lot of trouble with what I am going to say is number 4 overall here. The rest of these are all going to be on tier 3 because I don't really think there's any clear standout, but I do think Resto Druid is the 4th best healer to bring with the Blood DK in Season 3. And let me explain to you why, because you might have heard me talk a lot about that in Season 2. In Season 2, what I'm seeing a lot with Resto Druid, seeing a very poor commitment to doing something other than healing. Historically, the healing kit of a Resto Druid does not synergize very well with Blood DKs. Having 1 or 2 strong hots can be very good, but when you have a large slew of AoE healing kind of going on everybody kind of passively without any real burst healing, that really doesn't go well with Blood DK. I don't need consistent healing. I need big spike healing every once in a while, and I need something that synergizes with my kit. Something like having a bunch of hots on you when you pop Vampiric Blood, it's just not going to get you as much as something like a big Holy Shock. Resto Druid's utility kit is solid though. They bring a lot of utility that isn't necessarily that needed for me, but can be very useful, such as knockback and Ursals. The flexibility of the kit is quite strong too. The ability to survive going into bear form, doing good damage in cat form, maybe even balance affinity. And they have a really nice option in the Covenants. Seems like it's going to be pretty flexible in Season 3, whereas the previous picks on this are pretty locked in. You're probably not going to see a lot of Paladins playing other Covenants, and you're probably certainly not going to see any Shamans playing anything other than Kyrian. And that's more valuable than you think, especially if you're somebody like me who likes to only play one Covenant. Somebody has to be flexible, and it doesn't seem like it's ever going to be the DPS. But Resto Druid is getting some really nice buffs in Season 3, and even though that does help them climb up a bunch, it is not ultimately why I'm moving them from last to 4th. The big reason is their main problem right now seems to be mana. Every single time I play with a Resto Druid, they are out of mana constantly. I can't seem to convince them to want to care about that either, which is strange, because you would think that when you're completely out of mana every single pack, you would be a little bit more aware of that. I'm not sure exactly how much stress it's putting on them, but it's putting stress on me because I feel like I'm not able to pull when and where I want when I'm constantly worried about the healer having mana. But in Season 3, that should be squarely solved, provided they take the mana option at least somewhat often in dungeons from the new seasonal fix. As long as that's being chosen by your group, and I think it should be because it seems like the strongest one right now. We'll see what people seem to gravitate towards, but as long as that's being chosen somewhat often, this should completely solve the problem for Resto Druid. All they really need is a big spike of mana every couple minutes, and they'll be back in the fight. Resto Druid also has a really nice tool, and that is Iron Bark. Iron Bark is a very low CD, big damage reduction that can go on me every single time, and that's going to really help me on the pull. One of the things that Blood DK is really strong at right now is not being in danger on the pull, and a lot of that is thanks to Season 2 specific stuff, especially the Sogadon buff. With that going away, I'm actually really worried about that again. If you remember in Season 1, there'd be times when I literally get to packs and just get one shot. Now hopefully that'll be changing as we get the double legendary and the 4-set bonus, but until then, having a Resto Druid to keep that stable is going to be a lot more important than you think. So number 5 overall then kind of just leaves us with the only other option, and that's Mistweaver. Mistweaver is not bad, and they're probably going to be a lot better in this coming season as well. They've also been a healer that seems like they can do insane HPS, but at the cost of a massive amount of mana. So whether or not that gets solved in Season 3 kind of doesn't really matter to me. They don't really bring anything I'm starving for. They do have a very good utility kit though, especially on certain weeks. Having a Ring of Peace that sometimes can be absolutely a lifesaver, up there with Spirit Link, and of course bringing that physical damage buff can be really nice for threat as well. But outside of that, I don't really find them to have any actual healing power that can be very valuable. Their defensive external is good. That bubble's kind of cool. It looks nice. It's nice and green and bluish, but doesn't really heal me that much, doesn't really help me that much. Certainly something like Iron Bark or Guardian Spirit is just going to be better. And it seems like it's a hard healer to play. I've never actually played it, but it seems like sometimes they really struggle to get going. Another problem is that they're often up in melee as well, which is not ideal. If we're taking a melee healer, it's definitely going to be Holy Paladin. A lot of times there's affixes or things going on in melee that I just don't want to see the healer having forced to interact interaction with. And then finally, 6th overall is absolutely Discipline Priest, which is really strange because if you watch the video I made on this topic back in BFA, they were actually number 2 overall. And the big difference here is that they just don't seem to play the way I expect them to. In the old days of Discipline Priest, it seems like they were really about shielding damage, keeping the health high, using their barrier 3-minute CD to help the group. But now it seems like everyone who plays this is just kind of lost in the headlights. Like they're unaware of how to keep the group alive and unprepared for the damage profiles that are coming their way. I almost never get pain suppression when I play with them. I'm not even sure where they're using it half the time, or, you know, it is hard to use. It's a 3-minute CD on that type of ability, which makes it a lot harder to choose when to use it. It should be good. The kit should be excellent for Blood DK. Give me as many power word shields as you can, give me pain suppression every few minutes, and do as much damage as you possibly can. That's just not how they seem to play anymore though. I'm seeing them constantly spamming something like Shadow Mend, which can actually be harmful to me. I'm not actually sure how much the damage element of it works, but I wonder if I have Vamp Blood up and they get a bigger Shadow Mend, does that then make the damage that Shadow Mend can do to you even more so? I don't really know how it works, to be honest, but I see them spamming it like crazy. I see very little actual damage on most packs, and they just, I don't know when the last time I actually got a power word barrier as a defensive was. All through Mop, WAD, and Legion, it was so common. You would see these used so well, and their damage reduction kit was so valuable for a tank like Monk or Blood DK that used to historically take a ton of damage but have good flexibility after taking that damage. And now I'm just not really sure what their niche is. And since they're not really doing more damage than Holy Priest, it's just pretty clear to me that Holy Priest is just better in every single way. They have a much better healing kit, a much better kit to keep me alive, and they seem to just play it easier. I think honestly Discipline Priest is probably just really hard to play in 5-mans. I haven't played it in a very long time, but even back when I did play it in Legion a lot, it seemed very hard to use well. So anyway, I hope that answers some of the questions. This is a very common one. I feel like a lot of people have this question. I think it's very important that the Blood Death Knight gets backed up because they're not really the best tank right now, but they have an insane amount of intangibilities that they can bring. They bring an incredibly wide utility kit, and if you let me use that utility kit well, I will do a lot of work in a dungeon. But if you're the kind of healer that's just going to sit there and spam heals on me when I'm not even low or in any danger whatsoever, and you're not going to do any type of offense and then be out of mana for the entire key, you've basically gotten carried in that dungeon, especially on certain weeks. There's just no actual healing needed on many packs. So if you're playing a healer that isn't bringing something other than healing, why would we play together? At least one of the roles has to bring something other than their main focus, right? Blood DK doesn't bring a lot outside of actual survival, but they are insanely good at it. So even if a spec like Resto Druid or Discipline Priest could bring a lot of healing, they don't bring enough outside of that for them to ever be considered alongside something like Resto Shaman or Holy Pally. So I hope the philosophy is clear and that makes a lot of sense to you guys. I guess it's obviously going to depend on tuning in Season 3 as well. I'm making this, of course, before Season 3 started. The tier sets and the double legendary thing could really shift the meta, but I don't really think the philosophy behind why I'm choosing these healers will change regardless of tuning, unless suddenly one of these healers is suddenly blasting AoE damage out of nowhere. So anyway, I hope that helps, and if you guys have any questions, let me know. I would really love to hear your 1 through 6 if you do play a Blood DK. I also wouldn't mind hearing your 1 through 6 if you play other tanks, so I can kind of get a feeling for what other tanks are prioritizing, and I can be a little bit more intelligent with when I'm making these decisions. So thank you for watching. We will see you guys in the next one.